Hi, Ifri. So, we're now on chapter 5 of Wave Me Goodbye, and things are getting much more interesting. This is kind of the chapter where things start to pick up their pace a little bit. So, let me know what you think in this next chapter and how you think you might feel if you were Shirley. If you were her and you were in this situation, how would you feel going through that? So, obviously, new chapter, new illustrations. So, I'll quickly show them and then we'll get stuck in. Okay, chapter 5. Paradise Road didn't have a lady someone offering them private accommodation for the entire school. We all had to be housed separately, even the teachers. There were far more of us than there were village people. The large lady with the feathered hat stood on a chair and counted, frowning. Then she blew her whistle again. "It's me again, Mrs. Henshaw, chairman of the Women's Institute," she announced unnecessarily. "I'm afraid they've sent far more children than we were expecting. We're only a small village after all, but we must all do our bit for the war effort." "War hasn't even been declared yet," someone shouted. "I think we've all agreed that it's inevitable," Mrs. Henshaw said firmly. "And whether it's declared next day, till next week, or next month, it doesn't alter the fact that we have at least 100 children here who need a proper supper, a bath, and a bed for the night. If you can all offer a home for 2 children, we should just about manage to accommodate them all. Thank you so much. Please start picking out your children now." The villagers came crowding around us. They were mostly women. Some were young and gossipy, with babies on their hips. Others were older, like my mum, but not as smart. Then there were really old ladies, thin and withered, or built like tanks. There were a few men, mostly old too. One looked very like the scary man who had shouted at us, and I hoped he didn't pick me. I wanted one of the young mothers because they looked more fun. I liked the idea of a baby too. I could help feed it and bath it and take it for walks in its pram, like a special big sister. I decided on the mother I liked best, a woman with long curly dark hair, holding a chubby baby boy in a bright blue knitted jersey. He was clutching a small toy dog, waving it around in the air and going, "Woof, woof." It would have got on most people's nerves, but his mum just laughed at him and said it back to him just as many times. If I couldn't be with Jessica at St. Agatha's, I wanted to be with that young mum because she looked so happy and seemed so patient. I tried smiling at her, hopefully, though it was a bit of a struggle because I was still sniffly from crying. I kept thinking about Jessica. What if Sister Josephine really did punish her? Did nuns give girls the cane? At Paradise Road, only the boys got the cane, thank goodness. But it still made me feel sick when one had to go up to the front of the class to get whacked. Especially when Mr. Bentley, the headmaster, did it, because he made the boys pull their trousers down. I always shut my eyes, but I still didn't like the fall. I shut my eyes now too, to try to stop howling. And when I opened them again, I saw that the dark-haired mother had walked straight past me and chose 2 little boys with straight partings in their hair and nicely knitted red jumpers with a black Scotty dog pattern across their chests. If she liked knitted jumpers, why hadn't she picked me? Mum said Fair Isle was the best you could buy. But I could see that the little boys matched the baby, though I was sure they wouldn't help feed and bath him. I knuckled my eyes and sat up straight, peering at the other young mothers, but none seemed to be taking any notice of me. They were going for the really little cute children, or the much older ones, who looked neat and sensible. "Come along, ladies, simply take the nearest 2 children. I'm sure they're all lovely little kids," Mrs. Henshaw advised. But they took no notice, marching up and down the benches. One of the old men even made 2 of the boys open their mouths so he could examine their teeth. All the children sat still now, brothers and sisters, or best friends in tight little huddles. I wished I could be with Jessica. It felt so lonely by myself. 2 rows back, there was another girl who was also sitting on her own. She was smaller than me, probably in the class below. She had ringlets like Marilyn Henderson's and a red coat. She was quite a bit prettier than me too. I'd have much more chance of being picked if I could pair up with her. I stood up and tried to haul my case over, but another Women's Institute lady frowned at me and told me to stay put. We don't want little girls dashing about all over the place. Sit quietly, dear, she said. We were all sitting quietly now, even the rowdiest of the boys. It was so awful being looked at and then rejected. I did my best to look attractive, but I suspected that my nose probably needed blowing, and I'd somehow lost my ribbon, so my hair flopped over my forehead and got in my eyes. I kept tossing it back until I heard one woman that I looked strange. I held my head rigid and clasped my thumbs tight because I'd read that it brought you luck. It didn't seem to be working. People went straight past me, or worse, had a long look and then walked on, not quite meeting my eyes. I turned round to see who they'd picked instead. Sometimes it was the pretty girls and the handsome boys, the bright-eyed, rosy-cheeked ones with ready smiles and sweet faces. But sometimes it was the sad, pale little ones with patched jumpers and Wellington boots that made the women shake their heads and sweep them up in their arms. I looked down at my fair old jumper and my smart red patent shoes and felt despairing. What would Mum think if she could see me? There weren't as many villagers now. The same ones kept going up and down the benches as if they were hoping that a row of fresher, cuter children would suddenly be sitting there as if by magic. Come along now, Meadow Ridgers, Mrs. Henshaw called. Please take any two children. War is imminent, and we have to do our best to protect these little ones if there's bombing. It isn't a lifetime commitment. Everyone's saying this will be a short, sharp war, over by Christmas. You're literally saving their lives. So come on, pick two. The villagers looked irritated, and several muttered about old bossy boots, but it hurried them up a little. The girl with the ringlets and the red coat was chosen, along with a small boy with fair hair. Marilyn Henderson was chosen too, along with Mary. If only my own hair were long and wound into ringlets, I'd have much better chance. Two brothers were picked, even though the smaller one had a squinty eye, and two fat sisters were picked, though they were bursting out of their cardigan buttons, and a villager joked they'd eat her out of house and home. Off they went, two by two, two by two, two by two, like Noah's Ark animals. I was left there, along with a big girl with spots, a girl wearing thick glasses, the frame mended with sticking plaster, a small girl who kept her head on her chest and wouldn't look at anyone, the little kid with the shaven head who was scared of cows, and awful Kevin, the gangly boy with jug ears who had tried to lasso me with his tie. The villagers had all gone home with their chosen children. Even the horrid-looking old man had picked two boys, who didn't look too happy about it. I stared at the door, wondering if any more villagers might come. We seemed to be stuck here with Mrs. Henshaw and the Women's Institute ladies, Annie and the other WBS ladies, and our headmaster, Mr. Bentley, who was yawning and consulting his watch. Some of the Paradise Road teachers were staying in a hostel together. Mr. Bentley was going there too, but he was checking to see that we were all successfully placed in houses. We waited. Nobody came. I clenched my fists until my thumbs nearly snapped off. I was out of luck. Not a single soul wanted me. What was going to happen now? Were the WVS ladies going to the train station to make the long journey back to London? Would the Women's Institute snap the lights off in the village hall and leave the six of us sitting here in the dark? I started shivering. The spotty girl turned her back on everyone. The girl with the mended specs wiped them with her hem. Her eyes went all peepy without them. The small girl bent her head so low it was almost on her knees. Kevin bit his nails, and the shaven-headed boy scowled. I went over to Annie. What's going to happen to us now? I asked. Don't worry, sweetie. We'll find you a good home, she said brightly. But she looked worried too. She went to confer with Mrs. Henshaw and the other women. They whispered together, glancing at us every now and then. Finally, Mrs. Henshaw came over, her sensible brogue squeaking on the polished floor. Gather together, children. Don't look so downhearted. Course we're downhearted, miss. No one wants us, said Kevin. Now, Kevin, calm down, Mr. Bentley intervened briskly. Don't be silly, dear. Of course you're wanted, said Mrs. Henshaw. No, we're not, or we wouldn't be sitting here, would we? Kevin said, biting his nails again. Don't do that. Goodness me, you won't have any fingers left. Now, I dare say we could all do with a nice cup of tea. My colleague's gone to seek out a kettle, and there are lots of buns left, so we can all tuck into a jolly feast. And then when we're all refreshed and in better spirits, we're going to find you all a lovely new home. Just him, miss, or me too? Asked the little shaven-haired boy. All of you, she said. Free homes. We'll pair you up. I didn't want to be in a pair with any of them. The spotty girl was too old, and the glasses girl was too young, and they were nothing like Jessica. I certainly didn't want to be paired with either of the boys. They both spoke with broad Cockney accents, their clothes didn't fit, and they didn't look very clean. The little one probably had a shaven head because he had nits. Mum always had a horror of my catching nits, and made me kneel with my head on a towel in her lap once a week so she could comb it through carefully, checking. I decided that the little girl with the bent head would be my best hope. She was so small, she could be my little sister. She wouldn't be as sweet as a baby, but I could still look after her and teach her how to do things and read to her at night. I was a little put off because she smelled a bit like wee, but she was very small after all, and anyone could have an accident. I tried putting my arm round her. I hoped she'd cuddle into me, but she went rigid. It's all right. I just want to look after you, I whispered, like a big sister. I ain't got a big sister, she said, and pushed me away. The other children sniggered. I kept my chin up, pretending I didn't care. We sat silently together, although we felt horribly separate. The small boy started sniffing loudly. He wiped his nose with the back of his hand, and it smeared all over his cheek, making me feel sick. I hoped I didn't have snot on my face too, after all the crying I did earlier. I felt it, but I couldn't tell. I peered around, wondering if there was a toilet with a sink. Are you all right, pet? Asked Annie, coming over. Please, could I wash my hands and face? I whispered it, but the boys heard me. Ooh, please, could I wash my hands and face? Kevin imitated, in a high, silly voice, while the little boy snorted. Now, boys, don't be silly. I think you could all do with a wash and brush up. There's a little room at the back. You can pop in and spruce yourselves up. I started lugging my case. No, you don't need to take that with you, do you? I'll keep an eye on it, said Annie. Please, I need my sponge bag, I said. My sponge bag, Kevin mimicked. But I couldn't find it. All my things were higgledy-piggledy in my case because I'd had to scoop them back in such a hurry. I rummaged amongst them fruitlessly. I even took everything out and put each item back, but there was still no sponge bag. And I'm going to pause there. Let me know what you think.